Okay, excellent. Okay. Hello and welcome. It is a chilly Friday afternoon in Alexandria, Virginia. Wherever you are, we're super happy you're here today for a really, really important topic. So we're really glad you're here. And I wanted to introduce myself first. My name is Adrienne Cotton. I am a wellness expert. I have been in the wellness industry for approximately 25 years. Initially, I focused on fitness. I owned a strength training gym. I incorporated nutrition into that work. And then over the course of time, about 10 years, I realized that a lot of women were struggling with symptoms around perimenopause and menopause, and that their wellness was really taking a big hit. And mine was too. So I started Fitness on the Run. After Fitness on the Run, I started Alexandria Wellness, and now I own my company called Adrienne Cotton. So I work around with about 50 different women. I work with organizations and I help them find their true north for their wellness. I'd like to introduce my dear friend, Dr. Christine Keisinger. She is with us today. She is a PhD relational communications expert. So our topic today, as you know, is sexual health post 40. It has not only physical and emotional implications, but it definitively has relational implications. And so we're really, really lucky to have Christine here with us. Christine works with corporate clients as well. She works with individual clients on different components of relationships and on communications. So I want to start the talk with, first of all, we are recording. So it may be our best approach today. If you have questions, and we hope you do have questions, that you will put your questions in chat and I will monitor chat. And I will not, you will be anonymous in chat. The second thing that's really important for Christine and I, for you to understand, is that this topic is normal. We want to normalize this conversation. We want you to know that you are not alone, that many, many women are struggling with these topics and these issues and really haven't found a place to express some questions or at least find some solutions and tools. So nothing is wrong with you. Your body is actually post 40, post perimenopause, going through a transition, and therefore there are neurological changes, there are physical changes, there are muscular changes that I'm going to talk to you about today, and they are all addressable. Everything we are talking about today has a tool. There are so many tools out there that it can help women with these issues. So first of all, I want you to know what you can expect. We are going to define perimenopause and menopause, and then all of the changes that happen as a result of perimenopause and menopause. We're going to share with you some facts around sexual health and our pelvic health, again, which changes after around 40 or as we approach perimenopause, and you'll see and you'll know why. And also, we're going to talk about tips of how to talk to your partner. So, I am not a medical doctor, nor is Christine. So, as always, we will always want you to consult with a medical professional when it comes to any of these topics. And I will talk to you a little bit later about the type of medical professional that I suggest that you seek help. And that would be the first line of defense in any of these tools that you approach. You want to talk to a medical professional. So, we're going to cover what's happening in your body. We're going to cover what happens if we ignore it. And if we ignore not only the physical and the muscular implications, but also the relational implications, which can be far-reaching. What actually does help, we're going to cover that. This is more about education and awareness. This may possibly be, and it was for me as I traveled on this journey, and I continue to travel on this journey as I'm in menopause, that you may be learning more about your body than you ever have before, which I highly recommend for women in midlife. Knowing more about your body now is very important because there are a lot of changes that are happening, and we tend to get really used to our earlier 20s and 30s body. So this is about education and awareness. The second thing I wanted to make sure you know, this is all about how can we find the different tools. There are so many tools available for the topics we're going to discuss today. They range from holistic approaches to hormonal approaches, and to what Christine's going to discuss, and this is relational approaches. So everything we're talking about today has a solution or has a tool associated with it. So perimenopause, what is it? Peri means before menopause. So what is perimenopause is the transition that women experience as they are approaching a time in their lives when they are no longer able to reproduce. It can start as early as your mid-30s, and it can extend all the way to your mid-50s to late 50s. So you can start perimenopause as early as your 30s, and you can start perimenopause as late as your mid-50s. No one woman is the same. Perimenopause can be considered as much more challenging for women because we're really not expecting it and we still have our cycle. So you can have your cycle for up to 5 years at least and still be in perimenopause. So we're not really thinking about our reproductive health and as intimately and as closely as we would when we were in menopause, when we have stopped our period. So the average age is 47, and there are a whole host of symptoms that come with it, but we're focused today on the sexual health implications of perimenopause and menopause. Menopause, you have no more cycle, and we are no longer able to reproduce. Menopause means menses pause, and it pauses for the rest of your life, and we are in menopause for the rest of our lives. We are in menopause up until the day we die. So most of the time, it can be very challenging for women to seek the help of a medical professional. And sometimes the medical professional may talk to us about the different implications like hot flashes or sleep disruption or moodiness. However, they may not be talking to you about sexual health implications. So that's why we're here today. I had a whole range about 2 to 3 weeks, and I told Christine about this. This is when we decided to have this call. Over the course of about 2 to 3 weeks, I probably heard from around a dozen women about challenges they were having with regard to vaginal dryness, pain during intercourse, leaky bladder, pelvic floor. We're going to talk about all these things today. I was surprised that many women didn't really feel like they had a place to go. So we're going to, in our recommendations today, we're going to talk about the kind of professional you can seek. So again, this is partly because in medical school, often OB/GYN candidates are not schooled in menopause. They're schooled in helping you with reproduction and with delivering babies, but sometimes they are not as skilled in discussing and understanding perimenopause and menopause. So let's talk about what happens in perimenopause and menopause with our hormones. So the three hormones I'm going to discuss are estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. So what's happening with them? So first of all, estrogen keeps our vaginal wall thick and elastic and lubricated. What happens when our estrogen declines during perimenopause is we have a thinner vaginal wall, we have reduced lubrication, we have less blood flow, and we have a higher pH, a vaginal pH, which means we have an increased risk of infection and irritation. And you can see where this is going. Testosterone. Testosterone's role is blood flow, sensation, and sexual response. When testosterone declines, we have reduced libido, we have less genital sensitivity, and we have lower motivation and confidence. None of these are happening, by the way, linearly, and none of them are, if you're in perimenopause and menopause and your sister is in perimenopause and menopause, that doesn't mean you are going to have the same symptoms. The last one is progesterone. So progesterone is the hormone that actually its role in sexual function is indirect, but it's very powerful because it's working in tandem with estrogen. So it's often misunderstood. So it causes fluctuations in our sleep. It causes our anxiety to increase, and which actually leads to, again, libido suppression. So all three of these are declining over time. Actually, in perimenopause, it's not linear. Again, it's not as if progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone are all decreasing at the same time, which is why perimenopause can be so challenging because estrogen at the beginning of perimenopause actually goes up as progesterone goes down. So there's no rhyme or sometimes it doesn't happen linearly. So know that this is happening at different times and at a different pace. So as these hormones are declining, this is what's happening. Our natural lubrication drops. Our tissue loses collagen and elasticity. Our pH rises, our acidity rises, and we have more infections and more irritation. Our blood flow decreases. We feel less arousal, and we have more dryness. So when it comes to our pelvic floor, and I'm also going to talk about pelvic floor implications today, our pelvic floor actually tightens in response to pain. So if there's pain, if you have pain during intercourse, or if you have pain anyway, it's going to guard itself against pain. That's the beauty of the human body. It's going to guard itself against the pain. So these are the top three reasons how your hormones are declining and what the implications are. So now I'm going to go into the muscular and the neurological changes, and I'm welcome to any questions on chat as you continue to listen to what we're going to talk about. So what is the pelvic floor? So I'm talking about the pelvic floor. So the pelvic floor's role, it supports our bladder and our bowels and our uterus and our vagina. It's like a sling that holds everything together. So it's everything that sits between the pubic bone and the tailbone in the back. So it is quietly working all day. Right now, it is working all day to help control our bladder and our bowel function. It supports our pelvic organs and it prevents prolapse. Prolapse is when it drops and different components can drop. It stabilizes your core and it enables sexual function. So pelvic floor is very, very, very important. And like any part of our body, if we're not using it and we're not strengthening it, then it can lose its strength and it can lose its elasticity. So like any other muscle group, like our biceps or our glutes or our core, if we're not using it, we need to train it. So when it comes to options for this, I'm going to discuss them a little bit more in detail later. But as we're looking at what happens with pelvic floor incontinence, is we do lose our bladder. I mean, I can't tell you how many women in our program it's difficult for them to jump. Some women have difficulties running because we'll lose bladder control. So in daily life, the implications of all of these. We can have dryness or an awareness or like a rawness in our vagina. We can have burning. We can have stinging. It's itching because all of this sensitivity, because of the sensitivity stopping, detergents or clothing can actually cause more irritation. Sexually, we can have pain. We can have tearing. We can have microabrasions. We can have burning, irritation. So a lot of the things that some of you or some of your friends or your relatives may be feeling, this is all happening because our three hormones are declining or they're on a roller coaster ride. So then back into the pelvic floor. What are the implications of pelvic floor? As I've already defined what it is. Because estrogen receptors live throughout the pelvis, they actually live throughout the body. Dryness doesn't exist in isolation. So we can get tight pelvic floor muscles from guarding against pain. We can have pelvic floor spasms. We can have reduced elasticity in our vaginal tissues. And we can even have pain with inserting tampons or another pelvic floor device, which I'll discuss a little bit later. So this can worsen the discomfort. I promise the good part's coming to the end, the more positive. So what happens here? It is common for this to cause so much discomfort that women avoid sex. So what does this lead to? So this leads to reduced blood flow, less tissue stretch, less neuromuscular coordination, and a deconditioning of the whole system. So over time, what happens is the muscles become tight and weak, and the brain can associate intimacy with threat, pain, and pain becomes almost anticipatory. So the last topic I'm going to discuss is called genitourinary syndrome of menopause, GSM. It's the umbrella for dryness. So common urinary manifestations, again, this is another component of what happens sexually, is we have an urgency. We have to go right away. Frequency, we have to go more often. We have burning with urination. We have recurring UTIs. We have leaking with sneezing, coughing, exercise. So this is all because of lowering estrogen. And so the tissues become weaker. They become thinner. They become less stretchy and more fragile with pressure. So again, this leads to shortening or narrowing of the vaginal canal, loss of elasticity and plumpness, and pain with pelvic exams. So I've given you all these different implications sexually of our hormones going through this roller coaster ride and then eventually declining. So I would like to turn to Christine because I'm going to give you solutions after Christine's finished. Christine is now going to talk about the implications of what I just discussed relationally for us. And then after that, Christine, I'm going to come back and give the range of tools and solutions that I have to offer.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. And thank you for laying that out with such specificity. Because you're right, all of these physical implications have a further reaching implication that we often don't consider. And that is, how does this then impact my sexual relationship with my partner? Now, it won't surprise any of you to know that most, but not all couples actually don't talk about their sex life. They engage in sexual activity, but they don't necessarily talk about what that experience is like. They don't necessarily talk about the things that are changing. And so when we now come to this particular phase of life, we're also not talking about something else. And that is, we tend not to talk about perimenopause, menopause. So now we've got like the double whammy. And discussing very candidly what's happening in a woman's body and how that impacts our partnerships is critically important. I would suggest that, yes, the changes that are occurring in a woman's body can create a rupture in a relationship, but nothing's going to rupture the relationship more than not having the conversation to begin with. So I want to begin by discussing what are the implications of this change in women's bodies on the relationship. And the first one is what we call misinterpretation. And that is that our partner can misinterpret what's going on. Our partners might be wondering, does she not find me attractive anymore? Does she not want to be in this relationship anymore? Has her desire for me changed? Is this a form of rejection? There are some partners that wonder, is my partner having an affair? Is there someone else? So we run the risk of a lot of misunderstanding and misinterpretation occurring. And then for the woman herself, misinterpreting what's going on as, am I broken? Do I need to be fixed? Am I a disappointment? Am I failing my partner? So right out of the gate, if we don't talk about it, we run the risk of there being misinterpretation. The second thing that we run the risk of is what we call the protective withdrawal of affection. And this is when women will withdraw their affection because they're afraid of escalating into sex, or they're afraid that they will plant the expectation of sex. So if I'm expressing my affection and sex hurts, I might refrain from doing that because I don't want to set the expectation that we're going to have sex. And I certainly don't want to escalate my affection this kind of attention in the direction of sex. So there can be that withdrawal of affection. Number three, and this is a big one, it's what we call shame and identity disruption. We know that sexual well-being for everyone is critical to our overall longevity and well-being. If you are a woman who's been accustomed to experiencing herself in a certain kind of way related to her sexual identity, and suddenly that's gone or that has significantly changed, there can be a lot of shame around that. And there can be a lot of questions about one's identity. If I don't desire sex like I once did, if it doesn't feel the same way, if it's causing so much pain that I'm avoiding it, there's this quiet grieving that can go on, a quiet and silent grieving, the missing of that woman I once was. And that's a real issue. If I'm no longer showing up in the same way in my sexual relationship, who am I? Who am I for my partner? Who am I in this relationship? And who am I myself? There are many women who report during this phase of life, I don't even know who I am anymore without this. Another implication is the emotional distance that often gets created at this time of life. One of the things that we know about sexual connection is that it often culminates in this beautiful thing that we affectionately refer to as pillow talk. It's that kind of emotional closeness that happens once we've experienced the physical act of sex, where we feel very vulnerable and we feel very close to each other, and we're just full of those feel-good hormones. So if we're not having sex, if we're avoiding sex, or if it's been greatly diminished in its quality, we might be missing out on those opportunities for emotional closeness that happen post-sex. And that can be experienced for both partners as quite a loss. And then finally, one of the most tragic implications of all of this is what I define as a missed opportunity to actually find creative and inventive ways of being intimate with each other that far surpasses anything that can happen during a sexual exchange. And we often miss the opportunity, once again, because we're not talking openly and honestly about what's happening. At the end of the day, physical intimacy, sexual intimacy is a very small part of what it means to be intimate. Ultimately, intimacy is the result of direct, honest, compassionate, and vulnerable communication. That's how we go deeper with another person. Experiencing that and expressing that physically is just one way that we become intimate with each other. So how do we have the conversation in the first place? I want to do two things. I want to give you 5 tips for having the conversation. And I also want to accompany those tips with a little script. So step number 1, how do we have the conversation? Choose your intention and choose the context, meaning we should not be having this conversation while we're in bed. We should not be having this conversation if either of us are frustrated, angry, disappointed, feeling ashamed. We want to actually set an environment so that we can have dialogue about this that's going to be very supportive and uninterrupted and non-impacted by any high emotionality. So a good example of a script to use to initiate the conversation is something like this. Hey, I want to talk to you about something that's really important to me, and I think really important to us. Not to fix anything necessarily, but I want to talk with you about this to actually bring us closer. Would be very difficult for someone to walk away from a conversation like that if it's going to result in increased closeness. So lay the groundwork for it. Choose the setting, choose your time very, very carefully. Set yourself up for success. Step number 2, when you begin the conversation, you want to name the changes you're experiencing without placing any blame. We don't want to blame our partners for what we're experiencing, but most importantly, you are also not blaming yourself. So you want to come into the conversation being willing to name all the changes that you're experiencing from your point of view, from what your body is telling you. It's almost like I want to report with you or to you what's changed in my body. And so the script might sound something like, hey, in case you haven't noticed, my body has changed in ways that I never quite expected or even anticipated. And it's been harder than I imagined. And then you want to be really specific about the things that you've noticed that have changed. You know, I'm not as lubricated as I used to get. I find that it takes a while for me to even warm up to the idea of sex. It's like my mind is there, but my body isn't quite on board yet. Or, you may have noticed that I'm carrying a little extra weight around my midsection and I'm feeling self-conscious about it, which is why I tend to recoil when you touch me there. Name the changes that you're experiencing them as you experience them. And then it's really important that you invite your partner for feedback. You might say something like, I'd love to know what you've noticed related to some of the changes that I'm experiencing. So every step along the way and all these steps, we want to take that pause and invite some feedback. Number 4, and this is really important, we want to share the emotional impact, because the emotional layer of all of this is much more important than the physical changes that you're experiencing. So you might say something like this, and because of the changes that I'm experiencing in my body, this is how I feel about it. I felt confused about it. I've been feeling really alone about it. I've been feeling a lot of shame about it. I've been feeling disconnected, and I don't want that for us. So we want to name the changes that we're experiencing at the physical level. And then in the next step, we want to talk about, and this is how it's affecting me emotionally. Again, invite feedback. How are you feeling about all of this emotionally? And see what your partner has to offer. The next step is probably the most important step, and it's a step that is lost on many women. Many women put it on themselves to figure this out. And in step 4, we want to invite partnership. And basically what you're saying is to your partner, this is shared territory. Will you partner with me on this? We will figure this out together. Do not make promises to your partner that you are going to figure this out and come up with all the solutions. Inviting partnership can even be fun. You might give your partner an assignment. Like, when we revisit this topic in a week, I want you to come back with ideas for the top lubricant out there. Or I would love for you to do a little bit of research on HRT because I'm thinking about hormone replacement therapy, but I'm scared and it's overwhelming. Could you help me with that research? So invite the partnership by giving your partner some kind of assignment so that it's really known right out of the gate. We are in this together. And then finally, step 5 is we want to normalize this as a conversation that we are going to be having for the rest of our lives together. This initial conversation is just one of many that you will be having and that you should be having for a very long time. One of the ways in which you want to think about intimacy, it doesn't matter how long you've been together with your partner. You can always deepen intimacy, always, but that only happens via communication, verbal communication, nonverbal communication, through very deep listening, and finally, by making a commitment to have the communication be a regular part of how you two do relationship together. So the last thing that I want to share about all of this is, what can we do very tangibly and very practically to deepen intimacy together when sex is painful or when it's paused? And I say this with a lot of intention. There are circumstances under which, if you've not been addressing this, there can be such a rift and such a strain on the relationship that in order for us to make progress, we have to actually pause sex altogether. We're just taking a pause. So here are some of the things that you can do to deepen intimacy, to stay close, even if sex is painful or if you need to come into the pause. Number one, reframe intimacy. And the question that I love that'll get you into that process of reframing intimacy is this: what does intimacy mean for us now at this phase of our life? Intimacy in our 20s looked very different. In our 30s looked very different. What does intimacy mean for us now at this particular phase of our life together? And you know what? It's probably going to mean something else in another 5 to 10 years. Maybe there was a phase in our life where sexual intimacy was all about reproduction. Maybe there was a phase in our life where intimacy was all about sexual intercourse, orgasm. And maybe sexual intimacy now has broadened to include deep emotional connection. Maybe it's including this sense of safety, of curiosity, of being ever more present to each other. So reframe what intimacy means for you now. Number two, and this is a tough one, touch without any focus on outcome. There's a beautiful process called sensate focus. It's been around for a long time. And in sensate focus, we are strictly focused on the sensation of touch, of being touched, and of touching without any expectation that it's going to lead to orgasm, that it's going to lead to intercourse. It's learning how to just be with the pleasure of touch. This can be holding each other, cuddling, holding hands, gentle massage, sitting close together. Just take the outcome out of the picture and focus on how we can rebuild safety around this body. Because as Adrienne mentioned, with all of those physiological and hormonal changes that are happening, sex can be so painful that we avoid it altogether and it doesn't feel safe anymore. And if it doesn't feel safe anymore, I may recoil at any touch. And so we ease back in, touch without attachment to outcome. Number three, practice what I call slow connection, slow startups. Don't be afraid to use eye contact to make a deep connection with your partner. Again, to reach out, to take their hand, to wrap your arms around them, to engage in rituals, sharing coffee together, sharing quiet time at the end of the day just to connect around how things are going, actually using interpersonal conversation as a way of establishing intimacy. We have to go beyond understandings of intimacy being linked to physical connection. So slow connection, again, isn't about touch at all. It can be, but there are other ways that we can find to be together that are very meaningful, that don't necessarily lead to sex or set the expectation that there's going to be sex. Number 4, use your words, use your voice. We want to call upon the power of language to create what I call relational or intimate safety. That means give yourself permission to say things like, not now, without feeling ashamed. To say things like, this feels really good. Keep going. To say things like, oh, it's so frustrating. Can we try again later? Or can we try again tomorrow? To indicate what it is that you're loving about being together at this time of your life. To say something like, let's be really patient with each other around all of this. And then finally, and I kind of alluded to this already, consider intimacy as something that is always growing, it's always evolving, it's always deepening. But that is not going to happen without a commitment to very open, transparent, honest, compassionate, loving, non-judgmental communication, because that is truly how intimacy occurs. So sex at midlife, if there's pain involved, if your desire isn't the same, as Adrienne began, this is not about failure. It's not a failure of your relationship. It's not a failure on your part. Silence is going to cause the issues. Silence is going to cause the erosion in the relationship. That's going to be far more detrimental than any changes that you're experiencing in your body. So midlife doesn't have to be the end of intimacy. It can actually birth an entirely different level of intimacy. It really is an invitation for you and your partner to be together in ways that you perhaps hadn't even ever considered or dreamed of. Now, in everything that I said here today, it's important to know that I am only scratching the surface. I have seen far too many relationships actually head in the direction of separation, divorce, breaking up, because this conversation wasn't happening. And so if I can spare any of you that, that's why I'm here today. Adrienne, back to you.
Thank you, Christine. I was thinking that the whole concept of destigmatizing a conversation with your partner. I was thinking also about how so many women are afraid to talk to their doctors about it. And so destigmatizing this whole topic with your doctor instead of saying, oh, everything's okay, like we've all done. Instead, this is just as important to our health as our exercise, as eating a balanced fueling diet. Is as important as our sleep. This is a really important part of our health for our longevity, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
You talked about destigmatizing it with your partner, but openly and honestly talking to your doctor about it is really, I think, it's either the first or the second line of defense. First, of course, would be with your partner. However, if you have the right practitioner holding your hand through this process, your practitioner is actually going to really help you too. So with that, I'm going to move into a range of solutions and tools. And again, I am just scratching the surface. I am not a medical doctor, but I've done a lot of research about this because it is something that I've approached with many of our members. Number one is you can access holistic tools. You can use moisturizers that are for daily use and lubricants, which are used during intimacy. That is a very holistic, easy way to approach any kind of pain during intimacy. Sleep is very helpful, as you heard earlier. I know I talk about sleep a lot, but sleep actually, when we don't get it, we have increased anxiety. When we have increased anxiety, we have less libido. And as we know, in menopause, we experience fewer orgasms. It's harder, it's more challenging to orgasm. So if you're not getting your sleep, you're not going to have that feeling. You're not going to have the ability to have this intimacy with your partner. The second thing I would say to do is talk to someone who knows what they're talking about. And that is going to come from somebody who is a member of the North American Menopause Society. NAMS, NAMS.org, maybe .com. So you can get a menopause specialist who may be a urologist. They may be a nurse practitioner with a specialty in menopause work. And you may have an OBGYN, and you could have any range of doctors who have decided to take their education a step further. So they are experts in this phase of your life. So number one is really to find a menopause specialist. I have a number who I refer. So if you're interested, go ahead and ping me in your chat and let me know. I have a number. I have a male who pretty much started the North American Menopause Society, and he's an international speaker on this topic. He's very passionate about this topic, as Christine knows. I have a female practitioner who's an OBGYN in the area, and she is also a menopause specialist. And then I also have a nurse practitioner who practices online. So find yourself a menopause specialist. Find yourself in conversation with this individual in an open and honest dialogue about what's really going on. And there's nothing wrong. If nothing's going on, go see them now. Because prepare yourself for the opportunity that possibly something could happen in the future. So when it comes to your menopause specialist, again, you may be approached with a range of tools. And one just might be estrogen cream. It's vaginal estrogen cream is sort of it's like the gold standard for vaginal dryness. It is local. It does not have to process through your liver, and it is considered incredibly safe. So you may hear about that from your menopause specialist. And that is one form of what we're now calling no longer HRT, we're calling it MHT, menopause hormone therapy is what it's called, because we're not replacing our hormones. That's why they changed the name of it. We're not replacing our hormones. We're not producing them anymore. So you can also take MHT as a form of estrogen systemically. So you could use estrogen in the form of a patch or a pill. And most of the time, they'll couple it with progesterone that helps balance out your pH and it helps balance out your estrogen. Oftentimes, you will also have menopause specialists recommending testosterone, which can help with energy and blood flow and libido. So these are the range of hormone options that you will have. And again, remember, I talked about lubricants and moisturizers that are completely holistic. When it comes to some of our pelvic floor challenges, again, a menopause specialist can likely help you because they have a range of tools that they recommend. I'm going to put in the chat some of my recommendations of these tools, but there are certain trainers you can use at home. You can use pelvic floor trainers at home, and it can really help strengthen your pelvic floor. And you can also go to PT, a physical therapist. There are physical therapists who specialize in pelvic floor work. It's internal work, so you need to prepare yourself for that. But you can always, any of these individuals, you can always get a consult. You can get a consult and just have a meeting in their office. There are internal wands, there are warming tools, there are all kinds of methods that can help support blood flow. So again, all of these tools, there are so many of them out there. There are some really, really great practitioners. So I want to kind of boil it down to whatever, if you're having none of these symptoms and you're just getting way ahead of the curve, good for you. Or if you have friends who are, good for you. So if you're experiencing dryness, burning, or pain, I would recommend a menopause specialist. One of the hardest separations is to choose somebody other than the OBGYN who potentially has been your obstetrician for about 15, 20, sometimes 25 years. Sometimes that can be the most challenging relationship to move out of and to move into a new person. So I recognize what that is like. I have done it. I know many of my members have done it. To move to someone who is very experienced in menopause, find out if your OBGYN is a member of the NAMS and can have an open dialogue and has a range of tools at your disposal. If you have leaking, if you have heaviness, tightness, pain with penetration, this is also, I again would go to your menopause specialist who will likely recommend a pelvic floor physical therapist. Or a urologist. There's some incredible urologists in our area who work hand in hand with OBGYNs. You may have both of those types of symptoms that I outlined. Then you're going to see your menopause specialist, you're going to see a pelvic floor PT, and you potentially could see a urologist. But again, I would start with a menopause specialist. So I just want to thank you for coming today. I don't see any questions in the chat yet. I'm going to put, oh, great. I'll send them to you. Why don't I give you my email address and I'll send them to you. I'll send you the recommendations. I've got several really great practitioners who have helped many of my members. So I put it in the chat. I'm going to also put my recommendations for some of these products in the chat right now. And you can, that's also along with my other tools that I recommend for my members. What else was I going to say to you guys? It's really important to know your body, to know what's going on with your body. Like I said, midlife is a great time to get to know the inner workings of your body and the implications on so many different facets of your life. Midlife is an incredible opportunity to get to know yourself much better because we have the wisdom now in midlife to make the right decisions for ourselves. So if you have any, I saw one question, I don't see any more questions on the chat. You're welcome to always come to my website, adriancotton.com. I offer 30-minute free consults. Christine does the same. Christine, do you want to give them your website?
Sure, I'm going to put it right in the chat.
Perfect. Share any and all of this with your friends. We will be sending out the recording. So if you have a friend who couldn't make it today, make sure to let them know that we're here to help. You can always get a consult with either one or both of us. And with that,
And for those who might be watching, I don't know that they can see, they won't see the chat. ChristineKeisinger.com, should you need anything.
yeah, ChristineKeisinger.com, AdrianCotton.com. Okay, everyone. Well, thank you for joining us today. I hope you really enjoyed it and have a wonderful rest of your Friday.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.